Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I'm Jason Romano. It's great to have you joining us here today on the show. Before we get to our interview with Rennie Curran, the former Georgia All-American linebacker, I want to tell you about Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And we are so grateful to have them as sponsors, as partners with us here at Sports Spectrum. A hope more powerful than poverty. That's what Compassion is all about. It allows you and I to have an opportunity to release a child from poverty. In a little bit, I'll tell you more about how you can make that difference in a child's life. But for now, I just want you to go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Check out the website and you'll learn more about what this program is all about. Compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and pray about releasing a child from poverty today. Really excited to be joined by Rennie Curran here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. The former Georgia All-American linebacker from 2007 to 2009 down there in Athens, Georgia, was a first-team All-SEC linebacker in 2009, as well as CBS naming him to their first-team All-American team in 2009. That's a pretty great honor as well. And he was selected in the third round of the 2010 NFL Draft by the Tennessee Titans, 97th overall pick, and played 2 years with the Titans, 2010 and 2011, and then played a little bit in the CFL, the Canadian Football League, with the Edmonton Eskimos and the BC Lions. But Rennie is more than just a former football player. This guy is an author. He wrote a book called Free Agent, The Perspectives of a Young African-American Athlete. He wrote that at just 23 years old. Such a young dude when he wrote his first book. Has a second book out that came out a couple years ago, a children's book called What Does It Take to Be a Star? Rennie is the CEO of Game Changer Coaching, whose mission is to help business professionals and elite athletes reach their fullest potential through personal development workshops and one-on-one coaching in order to improve leadership and career performance. Rennie's got a great story. He's a really great guy. I loved having him here on the show, and I know you'll love him as well. Take a listen to Rennie Curran, former Georgia All-American linebacker, here on Sports Spectrum. Rennie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason.
Yeah,
it's good to be on.
Thank you, man. It's good to have you here. This podcast is the intersection of sports and faith. So let's start on the sports side. And I'm always curious from a guy who's sort of known for, playing for a specific college team, like you're a Georgia Bulldog through and through. When they're on Saturdays, if you're not at the game, is it an enjoyable experience for you to watch the game, or is it very hard? Because I've talked to a lot of athletes who watch their former teams, especially their alma maters, and they don't enjoy it because it just becomes so nerve-wracking. What is your experience like watching your team?
Yeah, man. So it's a little bit of both. It definitely is bittersweet because, for a lot of us, we have so many experiences, both good and bad. And as you're watching the game, you can't help but to relive those experiences. It's no different than, a military guy who, if he was to go back on the battlefield or watch it from afar, it's like you have mixed emotions about it. It's an honor to do what you do, an honor to be a part of the tradition. But you just know there's so much more to it. There's life that happens, underneath those helmets. There's guys who are experiencing things that people had no clue about. And life is real for a lot of us. It wasn't when I was at University of Georgia, even though Saturdays in Athens are amazing. The tailgating, all that stuff was awesome. Like, life wasn't sweet at that time. I was a father, young father. My parents were struggling at home, and different things, circumstances were taking place. And so for me, the game was much more than just a game. Like, this was an opportunity to change things for my entire family. And for most people watching this, entertainment is fun. It's school spirit, it's rah-rah. But for guys like myself, and I can speak for so many athletes when I say, like, this is so much more than a game. It's, like I said, it's an opportunity to transcend things. So that's kind of my experience. It's very great. Like, I love the Georgia Bulldogs, and I love watching and the excitement. I was just there this past weekend, taking it all in, and wanted to strap up again. But like I said, you take those experiences, and then also you see guys just killing themselves, man. Like you don't really realize all the things that you put your body through until after the fact. It all kind of comes back. You're like, man, and then you see a guy get hurt, and you know how much work goes into it. And so I feel for guys, man. That's the part that's hard to watch, is seeing a guy go down that man, like this kid might never get an opportunity, or type of thing. So yeah.
Well, that's the misconception too. I think as fans, and I've never played college football or anything above that, so I've only known as a fan, certainly working in ministry now and knowing a lot of guys. But as a fan, I would boo, I would scream, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And
Right.
it becomes entertainment, like you said. But the more I've gotten closer to guys who've played and been around this game now for 20 years since I started working in sports, and just realizing this is more than that. And that makes it difficult for you guys because you want to entertain, you want to perform, but this is about playing for your brothers, playing for a greater purpose, certainly playing for God in your case, and also to build this platform. My guess is your platform and where you are today doesn't really take shape unless you have this experience at Georgia. Maybe God would use it in a different way, but because of the opportunity to be a Georgia Bulldog, that's kind of catapulted and allowed you to experience and do a lot of cool things, right?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And like you said, it is, so much more when it comes to having that platform. Number one is representing God and giving him the glory through my performance. But then also, like you said, having that platform as an athlete, being attached to a brand as big as University of Georgia, there's so much opportunities for influence. And I was a kid who was, labeled undersized my whole entire career playing linebacker. And so for all those kids back in my hometown who were also labeled undersized, or who were doubted, or who weren't put in a certain position because of their stature, I became that representation of hope. And so all those different things were just really catapulted through my rise, through University of Georgia, through having that platform, through the success that I had. And every level that I climbed, it made it even more important for me to use my platform and use my experiences in a positive way that would help those who are coming up behind me.
Rennie, you alluded earlier in one of the answers, the first answer to my question, about the sort of struggles and trials that you walked through growing up and even into college. Can you walk us through a little bit of that, especially the ones early on, and maybe how they helped shape the character that you have now, and just kind of going through those trials and those difficult seasons of life, both yourself and with your parents?
Yeah, I mean, early on, like I said, probably about seventh grade is when the challenges really, really started. My dad lost his business, shoe repair shop, and that was the first time I really saw the example of how, like, when you put your identity and your hope and your faith into something external, whether it's your business or whether it's your status, when it's gone, how that can just be traumatizing, and it can destroy you as a man. And so I saw that through my father. And then my mother, she went through basically a situation where she had a surgery that went wrong, almost lost her life. And so all this happened, and football was my escape. But even with football, like I said, once I got to high school, I played running back my whole career until high school, and then got moved to linebacker. So that was like my first kind of adversity that I hit, besides family adversity. And then, facing being undersized, all those things. And once I overcame that, it became dealing with success, which can be a challenge as well. Getting to college, experienced in Athens, which I don't know if you've been to Athens before, Saturday night in Athens, but it's
I have
wild,
not.
man.
I got to go. I have not.
Like, if you can't get a girl in Athens on a Saturday night, like, you might as well give up. Like, it's just that many women and just all those things. So that was another thing I had to learn how to navigate, was handling the notoriety and females and all those things. And that's, something that's, I feel like every man struggle at some point.
Yeah.
Is just, learning to have self-control, learning, especially when you're known, when you have name recognition and all those things. So that was a big challenge. And then, girl I dated in high school, our relationship fell apart. And it was a very toxic relationship, but my daughter was born after my freshman year in college. So that started a whole list of challenges as well that I had to overcome. And still, all these things are still things I deal with. It's an ongoing battle, ongoing just opportunities for growth every single day. I'd be lying if I said I was, perfect or walking this straight path. It's just every day waking up, giving it to God and surrendering and knowing that, hey, I'm not perfect, but I'm working towards, being more like him every single day. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned.
You make the decision to go to Georgia and play under Mark Richt, right?
Yeah.
And Coach Richt, I mean, we've had him on the podcast. I got to meet him a few times when I worked at ESPN, and just a tremendous man of faith, strong character. Do you remember the first time you met Coach Richt and what that experience was like?
Oh, yeah, man. I'll never forget me and Coach Richt the first time. And it's funny, man, because when I think back on my story, it's super rare. And when I look back on just what I did, like to get there to the University of Georgia, people would have thought I was crazy if they actually if there was a movie that showed me. I was 14, 15 years old, and the first time I met Coach Richt, my Little League coach, she was like a second father to me. He would literally take me to the University of Georgia like every other week, like to the point where like the players during that time, which was like 2004, 2005, they would be like, man, aren't you supposed to be in school? Like, what are you, like, someone would make fun of me because of how much I went up there. And the first time I went up there, I remember like it was yesterday. I walked out on the practice field, and I knew a couple of players because the high school I went to, Brookwood High School, my linebackers coach at the time had coached on one of their fullbacks. So he linked us up. And so that's how I was able to get that behind the scenes access. And so I get up there, and at this time I'm like 5'9.5", 5'10". I'm nowhere on their radar. I'm just this annoying little kid that keeps showing up. and like the first guy I see is this dude named Leonard Pope. And Leonard Pope is like, if it was like David and Goliath, he'd be, Goliath for sure. He's like 6'9", tight end, huge. Ended up playing in the NFL for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I see him, and I'm just like, man, this little young kid, sophomore year in high school, just wide-eyed. Like, I don't know how I'm ever going to play at University of Georgia. Next guy I see is another eventual NFL lineman, Max Jean Gillis. Like, he's huge, like 6'4", 315 pounds. I see both of them walking up towards me, and then after that, like, I look out on the field, and after the play runs, like, the whole team breaks out into a fight. Like, it was crazy. And then after that, Coach Richt, stops everybody. He starts making them all run sprints. And right after that experience, that's when I met Coach Richt for the first time, basically. So it wasn't the best experience, but yeah, from there, got to meet him briefly, and then I got that motivation, man, to just get out on the field and make those plays. But throughout that, man, meeting him, getting to know who he was as a person, seeing how he interacted with his family, seeing how even in that moment, like, he's one of those people that even if he doesn't have the most time, whatever it is, he'll make you feel like the most special person in the world. He just has that ability, just, being an amazing human being and an awesome just representative of being Christ-like and a Christ-like man and Christ-like leader.
Yeah, let's intersect this conversation with faith like we like to do here on Sports Spectrum and learn that journey for you. Obviously, your faith in Christ is number one based upon the people I've talked to about you and seeing your social media. So when did you get serious about your faith with Christ and begin to kind of live for him? I have to imagine Coach Richt was an encouragement in this walk, but where did that start for you and kind of how did that take shape?
Man, so like most people who grew up in the church, I was one of them. Like, my mother always kept me in the church. So I was one of those who I played the drums. I was a musician growing up, so played the piano, played drums in church. So front row, access to the sermons every week, every Sunday, man. So always was praying, always was, had the foundation of faith. But I think my faith was more so built after, I'd say, making it to University of Georgia, because that's when I feel like once you leave your parents' house and once you leave that environment, your safety net, that's when your faith really gets tested. And, throughout the course of being at University of Georgia, of course, seeing the example of Coach Richt and the things that he did for us, having the influence of FCA and a lot of other organizations that focus on faith, like, and then through challenges, that's where my faith was really built. I feel like it really was solidified after I left University of Georgia, was drafted into the NFL, and then became a free agent. Like, that was one of the toughest times of my life. You know, I felt like I got cut after my second year, after being drafted third round. I was home for like 6 to 8 months, and I was just kind of lost. Like, I didn't really know what was going to happen next. I was 22, 23 years old. And that was the time where I felt like God really sat me down. It was like, listen to me. Like, and he literally put me on a new journey, on a new path. I was still training and still trying to achieve the game of football, but I knew that, that football wasn't it. Like, I knew that there was something so much more, that God was using football as that platform, for me to really serve him and for me to really grow. And so that was kind of my process of really, building my faith and also starting to get more into personal development and just building myself into the man that God wants me to be.
We'll get back to our conversation with Rennie Curran in just a moment, but want to take a second to tell you about Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. This is a chance for you to make a difference in a child's life. Your tax-deductible contribution of just $38 a month connects a child living in poverty all across the world with a loving church-based child sponsorship program. I'm on the website right now. It's compassion.com/sports spectrum. And when you go there, you see a list of children waiting to be released from poverty. Young kids as old as 2 years old, and some as old as 14, 15, 16 years old, some even 18 years old. Kenya, Ghana, Bangladesh, Bolivia, Ethiopia, Thailand, just kids in very difficult situations living in poverty. And this is an opportunity for that $38 each month for you to help release them from that poverty. Your support, your child sponsorship support, provides medical checkups, nutritious foods, health and hygiene training, educational assistance, mentoring, and most of all, your sponsored child will hear about Jesus Christ and be encouraged to develop a lifelong relationship with God. It's an amazing opportunity. We sponsor a child from Haiti, a 14-year-old boy, and we're just so grateful to be able to help release that child from poverty, and you can make that difference as well. Go to the website, compassion.com/sports spectrum, compassion.com/sports spectrum. Pray about it, and then release a child from poverty today. Let's get back to our conversation with Rennie Curran, the former Georgia All-American linebacker, here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. As you journeyed into the NFL, you were drafted in the third round of the 2010 NFL Draft by the Tennessee Titans, 97th overall. But you get to the NFL, and it doesn't pan out in the way that I'm sure you and many other NFL players have experienced this too, of just having this 10-year career and being in, Super Bowls and Pro Bowls. It didn't pan out that way for you. So how did that shape your faith? I have to imagine those are those trials that we go through. Even if it is football, it's still a trial when you've lived this sport for so many years and worked so hard at it. Tell me about working through that and kind of dealing with disappointment as a believer and as a football player.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a journey, man. Like I said, I went there with all these hopes and dreams. The first year started out good, got some special team experiences. Right after my first year, that's when the lockout happened in the NFL. Also, the coaching staff got fired as well. New draft picks came in, and the new staff that came in, like I said, I was an undersized linebacker. First thing they said was we want a bigger front seven. So I knew going in that I didn't really fit their mold. And so still tried to do everything that I could to separate myself, because that's all I knew was hard work, was faith, was trusting in God, and ended up getting cut. And so when I found myself back home, man, and experiencing the politics and the things that are out of your control, I'm not going to lie, it was defeating. It makes you really question your own worth and your own value, and like whether you even, like, I questioned whether I even knew how to play football or not. It's like, man, am I crazy? Like, and so that whole process was a process of redefining myself and redefining my value, like understanding what is my identity, my self-worth, all those things come from. Does it come from this jersey, or does it come from the fact that I'm a child of God? And so that's when I really had to assert and re-identify who I was, especially when I was back home, by myself, with all the TVs and cameras gone and the paycheck that wasn't coming in anymore. I feel like that's when you can really, really sit down and really have to face yourself in the mirror outside of all those things that the world tells you makes you who you are. And that's when the Lord pulled out so many things for me in that point. Up until that point, I never liked writing. I never liked reading any type of books. And I tell people all the time, like, the only time I liked writing before then was if I was trying to write a love letter to a girl to get a number.
Hey, that's truth, right?
Yeah,
that's being real.
Yeah, just being real, man. But yeah, I started, like, it's like the Lord just started pulling out all these truths out of me and just all these pieces of knowledge out of me. And so I started to write, and I thought about all the people who would go through the same experience in life, not even in football, but just in life in general. People like my father who had lost his business, people who go through divorce, people who go through different transition points. And that's when I started writing my first book, man. And it was a powerful moment in my life.
I saw that. 2012, yeah. You're 23, 24 years old, and you're writing a book. It's called Free Agent, The Perspectives of a Young African-American Athlete. So why write that book? I mean, you kind of just explained a little bit of it there, but what would provoke a 23-year-old to want to write a book who doesn't enjoy reading and doesn't really enjoy writing? Take me through that process.
Man, so the process was basically, like I said, I was going through this experience of evaluating my own self-worth and just, realizing so many truths about the world and about life, like who my true friends were, what really mattered most in life. All the things that are become really real. Like I said, once you strip away all those things, the job, the money, the success, the status, what are you left with? Who are you? And I feel like so many people go through this same experience in life. And I realized that I couldn't just focus on myself in that moment. Like, I could be selfish. I could, think, woe is me. Or I could use this situation as an opportunity to build and not only build myself, but to build others. And so that's where that thought process was. Like, how can I use this time in my life in a way that when I come away from it 5 years, 10 years from now, I can look back on it and be like, man, I did something with this time. I didn't just sit down and like feel sorry for myself, but I used it to empower myself and I used it to empower others. And I focused on what the Lord could do in this time, in this season. I flipped my mindset from looking at being cut as like some type of curse or some type of bad thing that happened to looking at it as a blessing in disguise, to looking at it as now I have time to actually work on myself and evaluate myself and impact people and use what God has like done in my life to impact somebody else. And so that's what really gave me the courage. And I went through even the process of asking myself, who would want to listen to a story from an athlete, right? From a linebacker, especially a guy who's been known for hitting people for the past 10 years.
Sure.
And so one of the things that I did, man, that really opened up my eyes as far as like the possibilities and the opportunities that I could do it is I went to a Barnes and Nobles and I just walked around the aisles and I looked at all the books in there and I told myself, man, like if all these people can write these books, all these people who I've never heard about, books on, geography and reptiles and biographies and and cookbooks.
Yeah.
It's like, why can't I do this? Why not me? And that was the thought that I had that finally gave me that push to say, okay, I'm going to do this. And it literally started with me just writing. Like, I didn't have an outline. I didn't have any specific aim. I was just writing, man, just trying to unload all the things that I felt like aligned with just that transition and learning about yourself and trying to strive to achieve your dreams. And then from there, as I was reading other books, I started to understand kind of the structure, and I watched YouTube videos. I talked to other authors. I just started doing that research, and over time, it all just started to come together. And then got with the publisher, got with the editor and proofreader, and a year later, 2013 is when I released the book, man.
Yeah, it's funny because as somebody who wrote a book, I wrote my first book at 43, 44, and I'm writing my second now, and I'm 46, and you write this thing at 23, and I'm just shaking my head like, man, because I know this process. The book process is not an easy one. It is a grind on every level. It'll tax your brain. It'll tax your mind. But I wrote my book not because I thought there would be a large audience, but because I thought if it can help a person one
Right.
person, you got to write it. And I have
Yeah.
to imagine that was your philosophy too.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, man. I sat down so many times and just imagined the person who was going through the same situation I was going through. Like I said, whether they left college and were back at their parents' house, or they got cut, or they lost their job, or they went through divorce, and they're just in that dark, like lonely, kind of no man's land place in life. And I put myself in their shoes. Like a big part of being an author, I feel like, is empathy,
Yes.
and really taking the time and having that compassion and really thinking about that other person and not getting caught up in your own story. I feel like a lot of authors or people who want to write, like they're so focused on just their story instead of focusing on the person who's going to be picking up that book, how they're going to be feeling or what even mindset or psychology they're in. And so I really took the time to think about that and wrote from that place. And it was, like you said, it was taxing. It was draining, man. Like
Yeah.
after I would write, I would just have to lay down a little bit and just like decompress. But I would go to Starbucks. I would go to Waffle House, and just like be in the zone, man. And it was an awesome time, like putting that together.
Yeah. So I heard you say in an interview recently, you talked about, quote, operating in your vision, which I thought was really good. And I'm imagining that's something that you've talked about many times. You're a speaker now and you have your own business that I want to get into in a second. But explain that to our audience in implementing that, both whether it was your football career or now as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
operating in your vision. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, operating at the level of your vision is the same, man. And I believe in that so strongly because so many times in life we get into circumstances where, whether it's like we're not in the position that we want to be in that job, we're not getting paid what we want, or we're in a place or in a we're driving a car that's beat up, we're in a house that we don't want to be in, whatever the situation is, like that circumstance and the physical can dictate, your level of motivation, your perspective, just basically just your overall life and just how you approach it. And so my thing is that we should never get to the point where we allow our current circumstances, our current situations to dictate how we look at it and how we approach life. It should always be based on our vision. And it's not enough to, people always talk about starting with the vision, having a vision. Yes, that's true. But I believe that you also have to ask yourself, okay, if I had this vision, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, where I want to be, I have to ask myself, what does my vision require of me? Right? What is it? How do I need to operate in order to make this vision a reality? And so that's what I mean by operating at the level of your vision. And so by that, I mean specifically, who are the types of people I need to surround myself with? What are types of books I need to be reading? What types of YouTube videos do I need to be watching? Like, how do I need to dress? Like, what type of meetings do I need to have? Like, really taking yourself and thinking about where you want to be in every aspect of your life, 10 years from now, and then doing everything that you can right now to create that reality. So that's what I mean by operating at the level of your vision.
And you're now the CEO of Game Changer Coaching. Tell me about Game Changer Coaching and this journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, man. So the concept behind Game Changer Coaching really just came from my experiences on the field, man. It's like everybody wants to be a game changer. You don't, at least for me, I never wanted to just be one of those guys who went through the motion. Like I always wanted to do something to make an impact and to change the situation, for not only myself, but for the guys around me. If things were, the game was on the line, we're losing, whatever it is, I wanted to make a game changer play. I wanted to do something to change the outcome. And that's the same philosophy I take into life. I want to be the one to be a trailblazer for my family, to change, situation for my child, in my community. And that's the philosophy that I've put into my coaching business. As I was building my speaking business, I ran across an opportunity with the company to start coaching some of their clients. And they knew I had the background of being a former professional athlete.
Yeah.
They knew about the mindset and about all those things. And so got certified through them. And so I was able to learn about the coaching model and all those things. And so I basically have now built a business where I help athletes and help business professionals in life and in their business, whether it's leadership, whether it's personal branding, overall just personal development, helping them reach the next level. and something that I love to do. I'm constantly mentoring, constantly giving advice. So this is just another component of what I do.
That's good. RennieCurran.com. That's the website. You can learn more about Rennie's business and what he's doing. You just said that you're constantly giving advice. You're constantly coaching and teaching. So who's teaching you? Who's constantly pouring into Rennie Curran, whether it's spiritually, just character driven, whatever it is? How do you stay poured into, because you're doing so much giving? How are you receiving?
Man, that's a great question. And I tell people this a lot. I believe you shouldn't just have mentors, but just like companies and organizations have boards of directors, that you should have your own personal board of directors. And so that's essentially what I have, man. I have a personal board of directors, somebody who pours into me, spiritually, somebody who pours into me business-wise, somebody who is a great father that I can look to, people in different areas that I can just reach to, and we're constantly in communication. These are guys, some of them don't even know that they're on my my personal board of directors.
That's right.
But these are guys and girls, who if I get around them, like one of the guys, I'll give you his name. One of the guys is Rodney Bullard from Chick-fil-A. He's the executive vice president of he heads the Chick-fil-A Foundation. But Rodney's a guy that, man, when I get around Rodney, he didn't have to say a word. Like, just by the way that he interacts with people, just by his mannerisms and his the way that he interacts with his family, like, that holds me accountable in itself. And like, those are the people who I love to surround myself with. Those who they hold you accountable just by the way that they live their life, right? And so those are the types of people that pour into me. And then also, man, I have recently started to do counseling as well.
Yeah.
And which is something that I believe is so important, especially for us as athletes. We go through for most of us, starting at from 5 to 10 years old, we're building this identity. We're, attached to this thing that eventually leaves us without any type of warning. And so it's like part of you dies. And so I believe, when you go through that, you have to have more than just mentors. Like, you definitely need counseling. So I've done that, man. And I'm not ashamed to say it. And it's not, most people think you have to be in a crisis or you have to be in some type of depressed mode or whatever. But I believe it's just about learning yourself and about self-mastery and about improving. And I don't care how good you think you are, how on top of things you are, you're always going to have blind spots in life. So being able to talk to somebody who has an outside perspective and can just listen to you always helps.
Yeah, and finding someone who won't judge you in any way because they don't know you at all, right?
Exactly.
So important. Rennie, this has been great, man. Thanks for being on the show. Last question. We ask this to all of our guests here on Sports Spectrum. What are you learning from the Lord today? What is God teaching you right now in the life that he has you in, the season of life? What are you learning from God?
Man, so the biggest thing I'm learning from God right now is about just not allowing my feelings to dictate like what I believe are facts. Yeah. So being able to separate the two, just because you have a temporary feeling, a temporary emotion, that does not in any way mean that something is fact. And I always have to remind myself that, if something comes where I'm having self-doubt or I don't want to do something because I have this belief that it's going to work out a certain way, I just have to ask myself, okay, what are the facts behind this? What is the reality behind this? And I literally have to sit down and write that down. And, that's been something that the Lord has revealed to me, that you have to stay focused on my truth. You have to stay focused on my promises, not, your feelings and your emotions and all those things, because they will lead you astray.
Yeah, that's really good stuff there. Rennie Curran, thanks so much, man. Thanks for being here on the show. Former Georgia All-American linebacker. Again, the website, RennieCurran.com. You can also find him on social media, which is where he and I first connected. Really appreciate you, my friend. Thanks for joining us on the show, and let's do it again.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much, Jason. God bless.
Great stuff there from Rennie Curran. Check him out on Twitter at RennieCurran53 and on Instagram at Rennie Curran. It's RennieCurran. Rennie Curran, the former Georgia All-American linebacker. Really grateful to have him here joining us on Sports Spectrum's podcast. We also want to thank you for listening. You can find us on our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Of course, you can reach us directly. You can email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. Those social media pages, by the way, our DMs are open. So if you want to suggest any guest ideas through there, you can do that. Or you can email me directly. I'd love to get feedback on the podcast. A lot of the guests that we have on this show do not come from us. They come from you. We need your help. We need your suggestions on ideas of people to interview on this podcast. Not just the big names, which we all know about, the Tim Tebows and the Stephen Currys of the world. I would love to have those guys on the podcast and pray and hope that we will be able to have them on the podcast. But there's a lot of other guys out there who are living out their faith in Jesus and are connected to sports in some way. So let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Jason@sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Have a great rest of your day.